Hey, Tim Frisch with A Frisch Perspective. Just wanted to highlight some disturbing trends that I'm seeing being highlighted online right now in regard to freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And I've been covering topics like this with Pastor Coates recently, actually put in prison because of his COVID stance, continuing to keep his church open and not limiting attendance to 15%. And has faced legal consequences as a result of his decision. So it seems that there are definitely cases of pressure being put on Christians because of their beliefs and the stands that they take. And there are a lot of people who deny that that is happening or will happen. But then you see things happening in the culture, things like what I'm seeing here. And this was retweeted by Eric Metaxas. This person said Amazon started pulling books they deemed dangerous to LGBTQ people. Some books were hateful and demeaning. Others were deemed hateful for questioning dominant narratives about homosexuality, gay marriage, and gender dysphoria. Ryan T. Anderson fell into the latter, and that's referring to this author here, Ryan T. Anderson. He says, I hope you've already bought your copy, because Amazon just removed my book When Harry Became Sally, Responding to the Transgender Moment from their cyber shelves. My 4 other books are still available for now. He says the book had been both an Amazon and Washington Post bestseller. While you can't buy the book on Amazon, you can still get it for now at Barnes & Noble. Given the aggressive push on trans policies coming from the Biden administration, now is a great time to read it. Buy it before you no longer can. So this author has actually had his book taken down from Amazon, and you can't get it on Kindle, I presume. So it's, in a sense, a digital book burning from Amazon here, and it's because the book subject matter offends certain people. Getting back to that initial tweet, it does say that some books taken down on Amazon were hateful and demeaning, but others were deemed hateful for questioning dominant narratives about homosexuality, gay marriage, and gender dysphoria. So this is where it gets really troubling. If you even question the dominant narrative, you can have your book taken off platforms. And someone actually wrote under that, how long before they pull the Bible? That might seem kind of funny to us, but you know, if you really think about where things are headed, the Bible says a lot of things that more and more would be considered hate speech. And certainly teaching the Bible, I think in some situations, saying what the Bible says can get you in trouble. And I think that's going to increasingly be the case from the trends that we're seeing here. Along with that, by the way, is something that is actually happening in the United States right now. I believe is going to be voted on this week in the House. It's called the Equality Act, and the New York Post has an opinion piece here. I will leave a link to this article in the video description that says Biden's Equality Act is a danger to women's and conscience rights. Reading a little bit of it here, it says President Biden has promised to unify the nation, but candidate Joe Biden also made campaign promises to the radical wing of his party that would widen our social divides. Guess which promises are being honored? Witness the so-called Equality Act, which candidate Biden vowed to make a priority, and which is set to be voted on by the House this week. What's the Equality Act? And who could possibly be against equality? Don't let the name fool you. The act updates the law Congress passed primarily to combat racism, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and adds sexual orientation and gender identity as protected classes akin to race. So if you have any reservations about gender ideology, as even many progressives do, just ask J.K. Rowling, you'd now be the legal equivalent of Bull Connor. Rather than finding common sense, narrowly tailored ways to shield LGBT-identifying Americans from truly unjust discrimination, the bill would act as a sword to persecute those who don't embrace newfangled gender ideologies. It would vitiate a sex binary that is quite literally written into our genetic code and is fundamental to many of our laws, not least laws protecting the equality, safety, and privacy of women. So this article is raising some serious concerns about the Equality Act from a women's perspective, but also I noticed a Gospel Coalition article that talks about the Equality Act. Again, I'll leave a link to this in the video description. And toward the end it says, why should Christians be concerned about the Equality Act? As Andrew T. Walker wrote in an article for the TGC, the bill represents the most invasive threat to religious liberty ever proposed in America. Given that it touches areas of education, public accommodation, employment, and federal funding, were it to pass, its sweeping effects on religious liberty, free speech, and freedom of conscience would be both historic and also chilling. Virtually no area of American life would emerge unscathed from the Equality Act's reach, Walker added. No less significant would be the long-term effects of how the law would shape the moral imagination of future generations. Now, I know that a lot of people would say this kind of talk is just fear-mongering and getting people on the right and religious people riled up. However, when you see what's actually happening here with Amazon and them banning certain books because it questions the mainstream narrative, even books that are, from what I understand, well-researched. Again, this book here, When Harry Became Sally, Responding to the Transgender Movement, this isn't even a Christian book, but the book is trying to give a medical perspective on the issue of people having gender dysphoria and transgender issues. And so the author, Ryan T. Anderson, is facing censorship because of the way that he's expressing his views here in this book, and that some of the conclusions that he draws is what I presume is causing the problem. So there is definitely already a cultural trend taking place right now where certain speech and promoting certain ideas are deemed as dangerous and hateful. And when you couple that with something like the Equality Act, where the government would actually be putting in place certain laws, certain principles that would say you can't discriminate, I think we are starting to see some signs that for people who hold to certain biblical values and moral standards, this is going to pose a real problem. So I don't think it's fear-mongering. I really think there's evidence that, you know, this is the beginning of something that could really get harder and harder for Christians. I wanted to bring up all of this really not to rile people up and make people angry or scared, but really for us just to be aware and look at this situation with a sense of realism. And I think we as Christians need to be prepared. So I just wanted to share some of these things with you, I hope in a helpful way. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. Just try to keep those comments constructive and helpful to discussion. But thank you so much for listening to some of my thoughts brought to you from A Frisch Perspective.